Before,
Sadhviji, God bless you.
thank you so much, Reverend Michael. And before we start with you and your extraordinary wisdom, I wanted to just take a moment to celebrate your birthday, because this week is your birthday, and your life, your birth that gave birth to this life is such a great blessing for so many. And so if we all could just take a moment of silence. I was going to have everybody unmute themselves, but then I realized that we didn't actually have the capacity to do that. So instead, let us just take a moment of silence together and offer our love, our appreciation, our blessings and prayers on Reverend Michael's beautiful birthday. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming onto this planet.
Well,
and
thank
you for coming onto this beautiful extravaganza. Your life is an embodiment of freedom, an expression of freedom. You channel freedom. And not only do you channel it for yourself, but you as a channel of freedom bring freedom to innumerable people all over the world. You really are this.
I smiled big time, period.
This incredible manifester of freedom for all. And I know that it hasn't always been like that for you, that there were moments in your life, earlier in your life, when you weren't such a channel for the divine flow, when your life didn't move in such complete freedom and alignment with the divine. And I'm wondering if you could share with all of us a time from then of what that was like to not be free and how you found freedom.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me just love you up. You know, your journey of healing from Hollywood to Himalayas. Let me just embrace you for a moment, and the freedom and the courage and the conviction that you had and still have to allow that particular book to come into manifestation. That's going to touch countless beings, that they too may touch that chord of freedom that's intrinsic to us all. So I just want to just give praise to you, and give, even though you don't look for praise, I want to give praise for your efforts. I want to give praise for the book. I want to give praise for those who pick up the book and who are pulled to the book and will find those golden nuggets of truth that will be life transformational. So from Hollywood to the Himalayas, the journey of healing, I think is fantastic for such a time as this. So let me just say much appreciation for your courage, the confidence in God, and your commitment to bring that forward. And I've watched you as you were putting this together. So I thank you for doing that. And when we talk about my particular journey, I think that as a child, there was a lot of freedom there, and then it got covered up and clouded by human experience and limited perceptions and imprints of the world and things of that particular nature. And so when that does occur, then there are decisions that are made from the limited perception that create experiences that are limiting, experiences that are suffering, experiences that are painful. So as I think about my as a child, up past teenage, there was a tremendous amount of freedom. And then going into young adult, early college, young adult, there was a condensation of my perception and kind of getting caught up in the world. And in many ways, one, I was very revolutionary and wanted to change the world by any means necessary. And I'll always remember sitting in a meeting. I was a propaganda commissioner for this powerful revolutionary meeting organization. And I remember sitting in this meeting, and as the meeting was about to commence, someone behind me said, "If you were to take over the world tomorrow, would it be any different?" So I looked around and there was nobody there. And so I thought that was a bit odd, but so we continued the meeting. And then the voice said it again. "If you were to take over the world tomorrow, would the world be any different?" And I realized that the voice was coming from within me. And I looked around the room and I could see the egoic pathology of all of us in this meeting. I could see one individual was territorial, one individual always had to be right, one individual, was very combative all the time. And I could see all of this pathology in the room. And I realized the world's not going to be any different if we were to suddenly take it over. And I left the meeting. I never went back. I didn't have anything to replace that revolutionary verve with at that moment. I'd just been attending Morehouse College, and I transferred to USC as a psychobiology major. I was on a path to go to med school. And there I was financing my tuition into USC by selling cannabis sativas way before it was legal. And so that's a whole nother world I was involved in. And I started to have a series of inner experiences that, because I was in the psychology department, I labeled these experiences pathological. I was hearing things, I was seeing things that weren't there, I was traveling. There was so much going on. And since I did not have any formal spiritual practice, I basically thought that I was suffering from something. Ultimately, an awakening occurred. I was killed in a lucid dream. And when I came out of it, I could see that I was surrounded by such beauty and love of the presence of God surrounding me. The love was and is beyond anything I'd ever experienced in my life. The beauty is beyond anything of any description. And I could never get back in that box again. It changed my life forever. The trajectory of my life shifted. Now, those moments of non-freedom, there was obviously, and our beloved guru was saying, there were moments of over-identification with personality, over-identification with I, that sense of limitation that creates the ripples of limitation and just across the board. And when the opening took place and the perception took place, there was a tremendous amount of freedom. Not only the freedom from limitation, but the freedom to express, because freedom is intrinsic. It's already given us, but we have to receive it. And I can remember coming to it a great awareness of even being free from the identification as simply a Black man in America that was fraught with certain systemic racism. I can remember not identifying myself that way anymore. It was that I appreciate and love my incarnation as a man. I love my incarnation as a man of color, but my identification was more of an individual that emerged from the eternal. So therefore, my relationship to the universal law changed. I was no longer under the law of the world, no longer a law of how people thought about me, no longer under the law of people's perception about me. I came under the law of the eternal, of which I still live to this day. Appreciate the lampshade, appreciate the incarnation, love it, but I operate under a different law. I operate under the law of a being that knows that he has emerged from the eternal. So that's a tremendous freedom that I feel, that when I walk into a room, I'm actually aware of the presence of God and what God is thinking about me, which is intelligence and beauty and love, not what anyone else may be thinking. I don't live in the world. I don't live in that world. I'm not blind to that world. I just don't live in that world. Now that's tremendous freedom that I seek to assist others to come into, whether they are overly identified with themselves as a woman, or a black man, or whatever the lampshade is. The light that's in the lampshade is what we are. And through spiritual practice and through insight and revelation, we become more and more identified with the luminosity, and we appreciate the lampshade so that the luminosity can shine through it. So as I look back on the days of unconsciousness, I recently reinterpreted the teachings of Jesus, or added, let me say it this way, I added another interpretation. When he is reported to have said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," people generally think, rightly so, that he's speaking about the individuals that are crucifying him, individuals that are causing him harm, and we've been taught to forgive people that gossip about us, say bad things about us, put obstructions against us. Forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. But I've added a layer, and that is, Father, Mother, God, divine presence, forgive the earlier incarnations of myself that they didn't know what they were doing. That all of my other iterations that had limited perception and thought and spoke and acted from that limited perception, forgive them. They didn't know. Forgive them. They were ignorant of a more expanded perception. So I've added that as a part of the teachings, that forgive all of those lesser expressions. And in forgiving those lesser expressions, they dissolve. They don't exist anymore because they were only an illusion anyway. And then the world can't project onto you what the lesser expressions said or didn't say, acts of commission or acts of omission. Another level of freedom, you see. And so that's where I seek to live. And so I'm always on the edge of the next insight and revelation of the presence of God that wants to know itself as my life. And so I feel I'm a free being, and the other iterations I have forgiven and stand in the light of God. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. You speak, and it's a transmission. It's a teaching also, of course, and it's a touch also, and it's a transmission also. And I love that about, I forgive the other manifestations of myself, that even as I am being harmed or wronged or abused or betrayed, it's not othering. It's seeing the self in them as well, and letting go and forgiving. And I loved your lampshade metaphor, because as you were speaking about it and that luminosity that is each of us, I was thinking how beautiful it is that in order for that luminosity to flow, we have to be plugged in.
Yes.
And that what our spiritual traditions, whatever they may be, whatever lineage or homegrown, our own way, it doesn't matter. It's totally irrelevant. But that's what our spiritual traditions give us, and our spiritual practice gives us, is that ability to be plugged in, quite literally, so that luminosity flows through us, as us, and for others. Now, I wanted to just circle and ask you about, you spoke about freedom as that which is always there for us, but we have to receive it.
Yes.
Now, As we have so many viewers today watching this, I know people must be thinking, yes, yes, I'm ready. Yes, I want it. Yes, I want it. How do I receive? What would you say to them?
First, we'd go back to the beginning that freedom is intrinsic. Does not come to us from exogenous things, from anything outside of our being. There's nothing outside of us that can give us freedom. No amount of money, no amount of whatever we could accumulate in the world. It can give us a level of mobility and things of that particular nature, but freedom is something that is within us. And I'm thinking about a gentleman that was unjustly incarcerated in prison for 17 years for something he didn't do. And he came into his jail cell one day. His name was Clarence Chance. And there was a book on his bed by Krishnamurti. So he'd never heard of Krishnamurti or anything spiritual. He was just very upset that he was in jail for something he didn't do. But he read the book, and he developed a practice where he was not going to allow past experience to come into present moment after reading this book. And that became a part of his daily practice. So after a period of time, he became free. He was in prison, but he wasn't involved in the violence in prison. He learned how to play instruments. He learned how to paint. He learned martial arts. He learned all of these gifts that were latent within him that had not been actualized when he was on the outside. And he became a free being while incarcerated. And then I think it's called the Innocent Project, heard about him, took on his case, and then he became physically free out of jail. Now, one of the first things he did when he became a free man out of prison, he came to Agape because his cousin was taking classes there, and his cousin was the first one who brought him to my attention for us to hold him in prayer, which we did. And so I asked him to come up. First of all, he was sitting in the front row. He was sitting with this beautiful smile on his face, and he had just been released from prison for 17 years. And he was very happy. I didn't know if that was really him, but it was. So he came up and he said, he thanked everybody for holding him in prayer. And then he said he noticed a couple of things before he came into the service. He said when driving to the service, he saw that there was a car accident. And he noticed the people were really angry at each other, and they are almost coming to blows about this car accident. And he was thinking to himself, they're about to fight over bended metal. He didn't understand why they were so upset, because no one was hurt. The metal was bent, which could be obviously unbent. So he thought that was strange. And then he comes to Agape and he notices people were rushing to get to the meditation service, and they were stepping on flowers while they were rushing to get to the meditation service. And he said, here people were trying to go to meditations, and they're stepping on God. They're stepping on Mother Nature, trying to get to meditate. And so he said, I've discovered that there was a lot of free people in prison, and maybe there was a lot more free people in prison than outside of prison. So he laid that onto the congregation. But he said, I'm going to not allow the past to come into present moment. And so when people ask how, I think we always come back to one of the greatest technologies, which is meditation, learning to pay undistractable attention to reality, have an embracing an intention to wake up, and coming into the awareness that there is an eternal broadcast forever expressing, and that we come into a deep listening so that we're hearing without ears and seeing without eyes, and then sitting every single time as if it is the first time. And then something happens, something dawns on our awareness, our perception changes. And instead of participating in the world, which is an artifact of previously held points of view, we start to participate in the world as it really is, the way the present sees it. It's a different world, and we become free. But as long as we're looking for something out there to make us free, or as long as we're looking for something in the world to be the way we want it to be free, then we're imprisoning ourselves, because the world of phenomena is always swirling. billions of people are at different stages of enlightenment and awakening, producing all manner of condensation of thoughts and experiences. So the world is a Rorschach test for everyone's particular point of view, but there is a world that's unsullied by time or experience. And we begin to have some modicum of practice, we get an insight into it. And an insight is an event where we suddenly or incrementally see, not with eyes, the way it really is. And then there's a resting in it. And then, as you said, the universe does a better job at our life than we do. This presence, this love, this beauty, this intelligence does a better life than all of the acquired knowledge and information that we get. We come into flow motion. It's a different way of living in a high order of freedom. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Even as you share, as you transmit, there's a very palpable experience, and I'm sure that everyone watching this feels it as well, an experience of freedom. So it isn't just a teaching, but it's actually giving us that experience even of the transformation in the moment. You speak the truth, and the truth itself manifests in that moment. You speak that we are free, and we feel it. And thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for being your embodiment of the divine here on earth, and for being such a beautiful vehicle and vessel for the divine will to flow here on earth for everyone.
Sadhvi, I would not miss it. Sadhvi, I would not miss it. We wouldn't miss it. You call, I answer.